It was supposed to be a routine patrol, just another day over the mountains, keeping an eye on our borders. That's what they told me when I climbed into my fighter that morning. But I've been flying long enough to know when something doesn't feel right. The briefing was too quick. The intelligence officer wouldn't make eye contact, and there was this tension in the air. I remember checking my flight systems one extra time, a habit that would save my life just hours later. As I taxied down the runway and felt the familiar push of the afterburners kicking in, I had no idea I was heading straight into what would become the most classified air battle of the decade, one that would test every skill I developed in my 15 years as a combat pilot. The first sign came about 2 hours into the mission. I was maintaining altitude at 30,000 feet when my radar picked up unusual activity near the border. Not commercial traffic. These signatures were moving too fast, too deliberately. I reported back to base, but instead of the standard acknowledgement, there was an uncomfortable silence. Then the strangest order I'd ever received came through. Eagle 1, maintain course. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. Something was off. The command center knew these bogies were out there, waiting. That's when it dawned on me. I wasn't on a patrol mission at all. I was bait in a much larger operation, one they hadn't bothered to tell me about. My heart rate spiked, but years of training kept my hands steady on the controls as I continued forward. The radio crackled again, this time with a different voice, higher ranking, more urgent. Eagle 1, be advised, diplomatic channels have failed. Consider all approaching aircraft hostile. Just like that, my routine patrol had transformed into a potential combat situation. I checked my weapons systems, confirming all missiles were armed and ready. The weight of the aircraft suddenly felt different beneath me, heavier with responsibility. Through my canopy, I could see nothing but clear blue sky and the occasional wisp of cloud, a deceptively peaceful scene for what was about to unfold. I thought about the photo of my daughter I kept taped inside my flight suit, her gap-toothed smile from her 7th birthday last month. Would I make it home for her 8th? I've flown into danger zones before, Iraq, Afghanistan, classified locations I still can't name. But this was different. Usually, you know what you're flying into, you're prepared mentally. This time, I was given just enough information to get me killed, with command seemingly content to use me as some kind of geopolitical chess piece. As the minutes ticked by, the radar contacts multiplied. 1 became 2, then 4, then 6. They were forming a classic intercept pattern, trying to box me in from all sides. The tactics were familiar, textbook maneuvers I'd seen before from a very specific Air Force. This wasn't some random encounter. This was a carefully orchestrated trap. And somehow, I needed to find a way out while following increasingly contradictory orders from a command that seemed to have its own agenda. Little did I know, the next 30 minutes would change everything. For me, for international relations, and for the future of aerial warfare itself. The first missile lock warning screamed through my cockpit before I even saw them visually. That distinctive beeping. Every pilot knows it, and none of us ever get used to it. My training kicked in instantly as I banked hard right, deploying countermeasures. Chaff scattered behind me like metallic snow, disrupting the incoming radar-guided missile. The projectile streaked past, missing my wing by what felt like inches. Through my canopy, I finally caught sight of them, sleek, dark silhouettes against the clouds. Not your standard fighter jets. These were next-gen stealth aircraft that shouldn't have been in this airspace, shouldn't even be operational according to our intelligence. My pulse hammered in my ears as I realized what this meant. I was witnessing the combat debut of an aircraft that officially didn't exist. Base, I'm under attack. Repeat, taking hostile fire. I shouted into my radio, pulling my aircraft into a tight, climbing spiral to gain altitude advantage. The response chilled me more than the attack itself. Static, followed by a calm voice saying, Eagle 1, maintain radio silence. You are on your own for the next 20 minutes. Survive. Then nothing. They cut the channel. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. This wasn't just a patrol gone wrong. This was a deliberate intelligence-gathering operation, with me as the unwitting catalyst. They needed to see these aircraft in action, verify their capabilities, confirm what had only been rumors until now. And I was the perfect deniable asset, just a pilot who strayed into contested airspace if things went south. The 6 fighters were executing a perfect encirclement, their formation tightening like a noose. They were testing me, probing for weaknesses in both my aircraft and my flying style. I could feel sweat trickling down my back despite the cockpit's climate control as I pushed my jet to its limits, using every evasive maneuver in the book and a few I improvised on the spot. My advantage was experience. 15 years of dogfights, countless hours in simulators, pushing scenarios beyond breaking point. These pilots, despite their advanced aircraft, moved with the slight hesitation of those who trained extensively but never faced actual combat. Their textbook approaches had telltale signs of pilots who'd never had to make split-second life-or-death decisions. That tiny hesitation became my lifeline as I executed a high-risk Cobra maneuver, flipping my aircraft to suddenly face a pursuer. The look of surprise must have been visible even through that pilot's helmet as I acquired lock and fired in the same breath. I didn't wait to confirm the hit before diving toward the deck, using the mountains for cover. The explosion above told me enough. 5 contacts remaining. My mind was racing faster than my aircraft, processing information while simultaneously planning 3 moves ahead. Why these aircraft? Why here? Why now? The border region had been disputed, yes, but it was a diplomatic annoyance, not worth revealing a classified aircraft program over. Unless there was something else here worth protecting, something valuable enough to risk international exposure. As I threaded my fighter between 2 mountain peaks, narrowly avoiding another missile, I realized I'd stumbled into something much bigger than a border incursion. There was something in these mountains that someone desperately wanted to keep secret, and I had just become the one person who could expose it all if I managed to stay alive long enough to report back. The remaining 5 fighters split into a 2-3 formation, a classic divide-and-conquer approach. I had seconds to decide. Engage the smaller group first, or take my chances with the 3. Either choice could be fatal. I banked hard toward the pair, throwing my aircraft into a controlled dive that pushed me to the edge of consciousness. The G-forces crushed my chest, my vision narrowing to a tunnel as the blood struggled to reach my brain. Through gritted teeth, I fought to stay conscious, relying on the pressure suit to keep me from blacking out. This was the moment where all those torturous hours in centrifuge training paid off. While my pursuers hesitated at the extreme dive angle, I maintained control of my aircraft, putting me at an advantage they hadn't anticipated. I pulled up just above the treeline, the forest canopy, so close I could almost count individual pines. My radar showed the pursuing pair had followed me down, but were struggling to match my terrain-hugging maneuvers. Their aircraft might be technologically superior, but they were heavier, less nimble in these conditions. I slammed my fighter into a tight turn around a mountain peak, cutting my engines momentarily to drop heat signature before reigniting them with a roar. The move worked. I emerged behind my pursuers, positions reversed. They didn't realize I'd turned hunter until my missile was already streaking toward the trailing aircraft. The explosion lit up the valley, debris raining down into the forest below. For contacts remaining, my breathing was ragged now, each inhale tasting of the metallic recycled oxygen from my mask. The leader of the pair wasted no time, climbing vertically to rejoin his squad mates. Smart move. They wouldn't underestimate me again. I used the momentary reprieve to assess my aircraft. Warning lights blinked across my dashboard. Nothing critical yet, but my fighter was taking a beating. The right aileron was sluggish, hydraulic pressure dropping from a hit I hadn't even felt in the adrenaline rush. My missile count was down to 4, with half my countermeasures depleted. I needed to be smarter, more calculated with each engagement now. I couldn't outgun them, but I could outsmart them if I used the terrain and my experience. The mountains had always been my playground during training. I knew how to ride the air currents between peaks, how to use canyon walls to mask my approach where the radar dead zones were. I need every one of those skills now. As I skirted a ridgeline, staying low enough that my fighter's shadow raced across the slopes below, my mind cleared enough to think beyond immediate survival. Why wasn't I getting backup? Standard procedure would have scrambled an entire squadron the moment I reported hostile contact. Instead, I got radio silence and that cryptic 20 minutes message. 20 minutes for what? For them to gather intelligence? For diplomatic channels to prepare for the fallout? Or for something else entirely? Whatever the reason, I had approximately 12 minutes left to survive on my own. The 4 remaining fighters were regrouping, changing tactics. Instead of pursuing, they were setting up a blockade pattern ahead of me, cutting off my return vectors to friendly airspace. They weren't trying to shoot me down anymore. They were hurting me, forcing me eastward toward their territory. That's when I realized their real objective wasn't to eliminate me. It was to capture me, my aircraft, and whatever I might have seen over these mountains. And that was something I couldn't allow to happen, even if it meant pushing my fighter and myself beyond all reasonable limits. The blockade ahead was impenetrable, for advanced fighters positioned strategically to cut off any escape route back to friendly airspace. My fuel gauge was dipping into reserve, and the hydraulic pressure continued to drop. Even if I managed to shoot down another enemy, the odds were still impossible. That's when my radar picked up a new contact approaching fast from the northwest. I braced for the worst. Reinforcements from my adversaries would seal my fate. But the IFF signature that flashed on my screen made me do a double take. Friendly. Not just friendly, but one of ours. Someone had disobeyed orders and come looking for me. Through my canopy, I caught the glint of sunlight reflecting off an approaching fighter, the distinctive silhouette of another bird from my squadron. My radio crackled to life. Eagle 1, this is Eagle 3. Thought you could use some company at this party. It was Martinez, my wingman from countless missions, the same pilot I'd pulled out of a burning cockpit 2 years ago over the Persian Gulf. Command had ordered her to stand down. She explained between bursts of static, but she'd accidentally misinterpreted the coordinates during a routine training flight. We both knew there was nothing accidental about it. In the fighter pilot community, we have an unspoken code. We never leave our own behind, even when orders dictate otherwise. The relief that flooded through me was quickly tempered by concern. Martinez had just risked her career, possibly even a court-martial, by coming to my aid. But there was no time for sentiment. We had mere minutes to turn an impossible situation into merely a desperate one. We fell into our familiar formation without needing to discuss it. Years of flying together had made us practically telepathic in the air. I count 4 bandits blocking our exit, she said, her voice calm, as if we were discussing weekend plans rather than a life-or-death struggle. What's the play, boss? Even outnumbered 2-4, the dynamics had shifted. 2 experienced pilots working in tandem could outmaneuver superior numbers, especially if those opponents weren't used to coordinating against multiple targets. I outlined my plan quickly, a modified version of the hammer and anvil tactic we perfected during exercises. She would draw their attention high, while I would come in low and fast, breaking through their blockade and creating a gap we could both exploit. Martinez climbed sharply, afterburners glowing as she rocketed toward the cloud layer, deliberately making herself a tempting target. As predicted, 3 of the 4 enemy fighters moved to intercept her, unable to resist the easier prey. She danced her aircraft through the sky with the precision of a surgeon, never staying predictable enough for them to get a lock, but always remaining just enticing enough to hold their attention. Meanwhile, I hugged the contours of the mountains, flying so low my wake was kicking up pine needles, my approach masked by the terrain. The lone remaining enemy pilot spotted me too late. By the time he banked to engage, I was already passing beneath him, launching a missile upward that connected with a spectacular mid-air explosion. The gap was open. Now, Martinez, I shouted into the radio, already banking hard toward friendly airspace. Above me, she executed a perfect split-S maneuver, inverting her aircraft and pulling through in a dive that brought her alongside me as we both punched through the now-broken blockade. Behind us, the remaining enemies scrambled to regroup, but it was too late. We'd broken their containment strategy. We weren't safe yet, But for the first time since this nightmare began, escape seemed possible. What I didn't know then was that breaking through their line was just the beginning. The real revelation, the one that would shake international relations to their core, was waiting for us on the other side. As we raced toward friendly airspace with the remaining enemies in hot pursuit, something caught my eye below, a strange installation nestled in a valley that shouldn't have been there. According to all our intelligence briefings, this area was nothing but uninhabited mountains. Yet there it was, unmistakably man-made, with the distinctive layout of a research facility. Even from altitude, I could make out large hangar-like structures, satellite dishes, and what looked like a runway carved into the mountainside. It was no ordinary base. The entire complex was designed to remain hidden from satellite surveillance, using the natural terrain and camouflage that would make it virtually invisible unless you were right on top of it. In that moment, I understood exactly why they had scrambled those classified aircraft to intercept me. I had stumbled upon something nobody was supposed to see. "Eagle 3, are you seeing this?" I radioed to Martinez. Her affirmative came back immediately, along with the sound of her camera system activating to capture high-resolution images. Standard procedure for any unexpected intelligence: find, document everything. The facility explained it all. The unusual radar signatures I've been picking up before the attack, the aggressive response to my presence, the strange radio silence from our own command. This wasn't just a border dispute or a test of new aircraft. This was about keeping a secret installation hidden from the world. But what were they developing there that warranted such extreme measures? The architecture suggested aerospace research, possibly prototype testing. If I was looking at what I thought I was looking at, this could be the mythical Aurora program that had been rumored for years, a hypersonic aircraft development site that officially didn't exist. The enemies behind us redoubled their efforts as soon as they realized what we'd seen, launching a barrage of missiles that lit up my threat warning system like a Christmas tree. Martinez and I broke formation, deploying our remaining countermeasures in a desperate bid to evade the incoming fire. A missile detonated close enough to my port wing to send shrapnel tearing through the fuselage. Warning alarms blared as my aircraft shuddered violently. "I'm hit, but still flying," I reported, fighting the controls to keep my damaged fighter stable. Martinez had problems of her own, with two enemies locked onto her tail. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of options. The border to friendly airspace was still 7 minutes away at maximum speed, 7 minutes that suddenly seemed like an eternity. That's when the unexpected transmission came through. Not from our pursuers or even from our own command, but from a completely different source. "American fighters, this is Overlord. We are aware of your situation. Assistance is inbound. Hold course." The voice was unfamiliar, using a call sign I'd never heard before, broadcasting on a secure channel that shouldn't have been accessible to anyone outside our highest echelons. Before I could process what this meant, my radar lit up with new contacts approaching from the direction of friendly territory, moving faster than any aircraft I'd ever tracked. The readings were off the charts, speeds that defied conventional aerodynamics. Within seconds, these newcomers had closed the distance that would take my fighter nearly 5 minutes to cover. Through my canopy, I caught a glimpse of something that made me question my own eyes. Aircraft unlike anything in our known inventory, moving with impossible agility, their designs so advanced they seemed almost alien. As they engaged our pursuers with devastating efficiency, forcing them into retreat, one thought crystallized in my mind. The secret I discovered wasn't just about theirs. It was about ours too. This classified air battle wasn't just about territorial integrity. It was about keeping the existence of advanced technology programs hidden from the public and from our adversaries. And somehow, I had become entangled in a web of secrets that went far beyond anything I'd been cleared to know. The flight back to base was surreal, almost peaceful compared to the chaos we'd just survived. The mysterious aircraft escorted us to the border, then vanished as suddenly as they'd appeared, climbing at impossible angles until they disappeared from both visual contact and radar. Martinez and I maintained radio silence the entire way home, both processing what we'd witnessed. My fighter was limping badly, the damage more extensive than I'd initially realized. Hydraulic fluid leaked from multiple breaches, and my port engine was operating at 70% capacity at best. Landing would be tricky, but after everything I just faced, a difficult landing seemed like a minor challenge. As our airfield came into view, I noticed something unusual. The tower directed us to a remote runway rarely used except for classified operations, and the moment we touched down, security vehicles surrounded our aircraft. Men in suits rather than uniforms approached as I powered down my engines. No ground crew came to assist, just these stern-faced individuals who didn't identify themselves as they escorted Martinez and I to separate vehicles. No medical check, no debriefing with our squadron commander, just a silent drive to a facility on the far side of the base I'd never entered before. The building had no markings, no windows, nothing to indicate what happened inside. I was led through security checkpoints that required clearance levels far above my own, into a conference room where 5 people waited. Only one wore a military uniform, a general I recognized from Joint Chiefs press conferences. The others wore civilian clothes, but carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of high-level intelligence personnel. The door closed behind me with a heavy click that made it clear this wasn't a standard debriefing. "Major, what you encountered today was a Class 1 security event," the general began without preamble. "Before we proceed, I need to confirm, beyond what's in your flight recorder, exactly what you saw." I described everything: the engagement with the advanced enemy fighters, the hidden facility, the mysterious allies who came to our rescue. With each detail, the tension in the room grew palpable. They exchanged glances that spoke volumes. My account was confirming something they already suspected. The general pushed a document across the table, a non-disclosure agreement unlike any I'd seen before, with penalties explicitly listed that went far beyond normal security protocols. "What happens next depends entirely on your discretion, Major," one of the civilians said. "Some pilots in your situation choose early retirement with full benefits. Others continue their service under modified parameters." I stared at the document, understanding the unspoken choice being presented. I could walk away, comfortable but silenced, or I could step deeper into a world where such technological marvels existed alongside secrets dark enough to warrant extreme measures to protect them. The civilian across from me seemed to read my thoughts. "Your wingman has already made her decision," he said, though he didn't specify which choice Martinez had made. "You have unique qualities we find valuable: quick thinking under pressure, adaptability, and most importantly, discretion. Today wasn't just an unfortunate encounter. It was also an audition of sorts. One you passed admirably." I felt a chill run through me at his words. Had this entire incident been orchestrated? Was my routine patrol actually a carefully designed test to see how I'd perform under these exact circumstances? It seemed impossible, yet the calculating looks on their faces suggested otherwise. As I picked up the pen to sign the document, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just agreeing to keep secrets. I was opening a door to a reality few ever glimpsed, where cutting-edge technology, geopolitical maneuvering, and carefully managed public perception created a world within our world. And now, for better or worse, I was about to become part of it. 3 weeks passed before I saw Martinez again. 3 weeks of intense debriefings, medical evaluations, and psychological assessments. They didn't just want to know what I'd seen. They wanted to know how I processed it, how I handled the stress, whether I could be trusted with information that would rewrite my understanding of modern warfare. I was kept in a secure wing of the base, my communications with the outside world limited to brief, monitored calls to my family. No details about what had happened, just assurances that I was safe and working on a classified assignment. The isolation was deliberate, part of their evaluation process, testing how I handled being cut off from my normal support systems. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of questions and tests, they brought me to a facility buried deep underneath the main base, a complex I never knew existed despite years stationed here. Martinez was waiting in a briefing room that looked more like something from NASA than the Air Force. advanced holographic displays, technical schematics of aircraft unlike anything in our known inventory, and a team of both military personnel and civilians with the focused intensity of people working on something revolutionary. She smiled when she saw me, relief evident in her expression. "Glad you made it through the gauntlet," she said, embracing me briefly. "I was starting to think they decided to stick you in some deep dark hole." Her joke had an edge to it. We both knew that it had been a real possibility, depending on how we'd responded to the scrutiny. A silver-haired woman in civilian clothes approached us, introducing herself simply as Director Keller. No agency affiliation, no explanation of her role. She activated the main display with a gesture, bringing up footage from our gun cameras showing those impossible aircraft that had come to our rescue. "What you encountered," Keller explained, "was the leading edge of the Phantom Works program, a multi-decade black project developing aerospace capabilities decades ahead of what the public believes possible." The display shifted to show technical specifications that made my eyes widen. Propulsion systems, materials, and aerodynamics that seemed to bend the laws of physics as I understood them. "The facility you discovered was not ours," she continued. "It belongs to our adversaries, who have been attempting to replicate technology they believe we possess. They're close, too close, which is why your encounter triggered such an aggressive response." Martinez and I exchanged glances, both processing the implications. The dogfight hadn't been just about territorial airspace. It had been a technological Cold War briefly turning hot, with both sides desperate to protect their advances while gathering intelligence on the other's capabilities. Keller gestured to a different section of the display, showing what appeared to be a training program schedule. "You've both been selected for integration into Phantom Flight, the operational arm of the program. Your conventional fighter experience, combined with your performance under extreme pressure, makes you ideal candidates." Another official stepped forward, adding, "What happened that day wasn't entirely coincidental. We've been evaluating potential recruits for months. Your patrol route was deliberately designed to skirt the edges of that restricted zone, a calculated risk to see how you'd respond if engaged." I felt a surge of anger at the revelation. They'd used us as bait, put our lives at risk as part of some elaborate assessment. But before I could voice my objection, Martinez asked the question that was burning in my mind as well. "And if we'd been shot down? If we hadn't survived your evaluation?" The room fell silent for a moment, the officials exchanging uncomfortable glances. Finally, Keller responded with brutal honesty. "Then you wouldn't have been the right pilots for what comes next." Her words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the cold calculations that drove programs like this. "What exactly comes next?" I asked, still processing everything I'd heard. In response, Keller led us through a heavy security door into an enormous underground hangar. There, bathed in harsh white light, stood the answer. Aircraft identical to those that had saved us, their sleek, almost predatory design unlike anything in any public Air Force inventory. But these weren't just advanced fighters. According to the briefing that followed, they represented an entirely new paradigm in aerospace capability, incorporating technologies that had been developed in absolute secrecy for decades. As we approached the nearest craft, a technician handed us each what looked like next-generation flight suits. "Training begins tomorrow," Keller said matter-of-factly. "I suggest you both get some rest. You're going to need it." Looking at those aircraft, knowing what they were capable of after witnessing them in action, I realized we were standing at the threshold of a new era in military aviation, one that would remain hidden from the world until some future conflict forced it into the light. 6 months into the Phantom Works program, I barely recognized my own life. Everything had changed: my security clearance, my daily routines, even where I lived on base. The training was unlike anything I'd experienced in conventional fighter programs. Part aircraft operation, part advanced physics education, part physical conditioning for forces the human body wasn't designed to endure. We learned to pilot craft that could pull maneuvers that would kill an unprotected human, using neural interface systems that felt more science fiction than military technology. Each day pushed the boundaries of what I thought possible, both for the aircraft and for myself. Martinez adapted faster than I did, her background in engineering giving her an edge in understanding the theoretical principles behind the technology. But what I lacked in technical knowledge, I made up for in tactical thinking, developing new combat approaches that leverage these crafts' unique capabilities. The truth about the program's history emerged gradually through conversations with the long-term personnel. Phantom Works hadn't begun as a military project at all. It had started decades ago as an analysis program for unexplained aerospace phenomena, investigating reports from pilots and tracking radar anomalies that defied conventional explanation. Over time, it had evolved from studying these occurrences to reverse engineering the principles they observed, gradually developing technologies that mimic capabilities once thought impossible. The most startling revelation came during a late-night conversation with Dr. Harrington, one of the program's senior scientists. "We didn't invent most of this," he confided, gesturing to the propulsion system we'd been studying. "We observed, we adapted, we improved, but the core concepts came from analyzing what was already flying in our skies." The implication hung in the air between us, neither confirming nor denying the question that immediately sprang to mind about the technology's ultimate origin. The incident that had brought Martinez and me into the program wasn't isolated. Similar encounters have been happening with increasing frequency along various borders and sensitive locations. Our adversaries were getting bolder in their attempts to uncover the program's secrets, and intelligence suggested they were making significant advances in their own version of the technology. What had once been a carefully managed secret was threatening to break into open technological warfare, with each side pushing their capabilities to gain advantage. During simulation exercises, we practiced scenarios that felt disturbingly plausible. Intercept missions against advanced craft, strategic strikes against research facilities, high-stakes technological theft, and counter-theft operations. The implications were sobering. If these technologies were deployed in open conflict, the nature of warfare would change overnight, with devastating consequences for conventional forces caught unprepared. As my understanding deepened, so did my concern about the broader implications. The public remained completely unaware of these advances, still believing air warfare operated within the constraints they saw in news reports and military demonstrations. Nations were developing capabilities in secret that rendered traditional defense systems obsolete, creating a hidden arms race with potentially catastrophic consequences if it ever spilled into open conflict. During a rare moment of candor, Keller addressed this directly. "There's a reason this remains black budget, off the books," she explained. "The moment this technology becomes public, everything changes: military doctrine, international relations, public perception of security. We're not just protecting technology, we're managing a transition that needs to happen gradually or risk global panic." I understood the logic, but the weight of the secrecy was heavy. Every time I spoke with family or old squadron mates, I was living a carefully constructed fiction, unable to share the reality of what I now knew and did every day. As Martinez and I prepared for our first official deployment as Phantom pilots, I couldn't help wondering, were we protecting humanity from dangerous truths, or simply delaying an inevitable revelation? And when that day finally came, would the world be prepared for the reality that a select few of us were already living? What begins as a routine mission can sometimes reveal truths that change everything we thought we knew. The boundaries between possible and impossible aren't fixed. They're constantly being rewritten by those willing to push beyond conventional thinking. The courage to face the unknown, to adapt when confronted with paradigm-shifting discoveries, defines not just the exceptional pilot, but the forward-thinking individual in any field. The skies above us hold more secrets than most will ever realize, technological marvels developed in shadow, waiting for the moment when they'll reshape our understanding of what's possible. Have you ever wondered what technological revolutions are happening right now, hidden from public view? How many impossible breakthroughs are already flying, already operational, already changing the rules of the game while most remain unaware? Think about the courage it takes to be first, the first to fly an untested aircraft, the first to engage with technology beyond your training, the first to glimpse a truth so profound it reshapes your entire worldview. That courage isn't limited to elite pilots or classified programs. It's available to anyone willing to push boundaries and question limitations in their own life. What would change in your world if you discovered that what you thought was impossible was actually within reach? How would you approach your challenges differently if you knew advanced solutions already existed, just waiting for you to discover and apply them? The most profound changes often begin with a single moment of clarity, that instant when you realize the rules you've been following were more flexible than you ever imagined. Just as our pilot discovered capabilities beyond conventional limits, you too might find that your greatest breakthroughs lie just past the boundaries of what you currently believe possible. If this glimpse into the world of classified aerospace technology and hidden capabilities has sparked your curiosity, there's so much more to explore. Hit the subscribe button and activate notifications to join us for our next revelation. From secret military operations to technological advances that defy explanation, we're constantly uncovering stories that challenge conventional understanding. The truth is out there, sometimes hidden in plain sight, sometimes buried in classified files. And together, we'll continue to bring these revelations to light. Remember, today's science fiction is often tomorrow's operational reality, and the most extraordinary discoveries await those brave enough to look beyond the ordinary. Are you ready to see what else is flying in our skies?